Hello, everyone. So I'm here to kind of preview Oakland here. So they're 1-1 right now. Offensively, they're tied 22nd in total offense for 332 yards per game through two games. 22nd in passing yards at 218 and a half. Tied 8th in sacks allowed at 3. 12th in rushing yards at 113.5, and they're tied 9th in yards per carry at 4.8. They are tied for second in third down percentage at 57% and 25th in points per game at 17. Now, defensively, they're a little weaker, but they have a similar strength, which is the rushing attack, because they're 26th in total defense, allowing 404 yards per game so far. They are 32nd in passing yards, allowed at 341, and tied 13th in sacks with 5 of them. And they are 5th in rushing yards allowed, allowing only 63 a game, and they're tied 4th in yards per carry allowed at 2.8, which I think the yards per carry allowed is probably a little bit more telling of a sign, because there are some people that's like, well, of course they will be 5th in rushing yards allowed. They play Kansas City. Well, they also only allowed 2.8 yards per carry on average through the last two games. Usually when you see that, you'll just see a team will mostly throw like Kansas City, but then when they do run, they'll get these larger chunks. And it didn't really happen that way. They are, however, 29th in third down percentage at 52% and 17th in points per game allowed at 22. Now, their injury report is kind of lengthy, I would say. You have Dwayne Harris. He's a wide receiver slash kick returner, and he's a really good return specialist. But he's out with an ankle injury, and I imagine Hunter Renfrow probably comes in for that. Any Raider people, you could tell me if I'm wrong if you want. Gabe Jackson, he's out with a knee. Trent Brown, questionable with a knee, but only had the 1 day of practice. So it will be interesting to see if he can or cannot go. Vontez Burfict, questionable with a shoulder and a knee. Corey Liuget, questionable with a knee. He's a defensive tackle. PJ Hall, another defensive tackle, questionable with an illness. Denzel Good, another offensive lineman. He's a more of a versatile backup type, though. He is questionable with an ankle. And Lamarcus Joyner, a versatile safety who has also played corner in the past. He's questionable with a groin injury. So obviously, I think the two things to really keep an eye here is Trent Brown, because he's their prized free agent offensive tackle. He's playing right tackle, which means their backup guy, which I would think is Brandon Parker, would be lined up primarily on Danielle Hunter, and I think that's a major mismatch. So that's a thing you watch for that. And the other one that wasn't listed on here because he didn't have an injury designation, which I found kind of surprising, was Josh Jacobs. So he's had a hip injury and he's had an illness that has reportedly made him lose 10 pounds this week. So assuming he does play, because there was no injury designation on him, I would think probably a lesser workload than we've seen the past 2 weeks with him. So I don't know if you want to alter fantasy lineups for that kind of stuff, but I would think probably a little bit less of a workload for him. And you're probably looking at quite a bit more of DeAndre Washington and Jalen Richard. And Minnesota here, they are 20th in total offense with 345, 31st in passing yards at 160 a game. They are tied third in sacks allowed with 2. They are tied second in rushing yards a game at 185 flat there, and tied third in yards per carry at 5.7, and 15th in third down percentage at 39 offensively, 39%. Tied 12th in points per game at 22. Defensively, they are 15th in total defense at 340, 13th in passing yards allowed at 231.5, and they're tied 8th in sacks. And they are 15th in rushing yards allowed with 108.5 and tied 14th in yards per carry allowed at 4.3, which I think all of us can say that's a little disappointing, since they kind of wanted to go get Shamar Stephen to go and beef up the line, so to speak, so they can stop the run better. And it hasn't worked at all, really. It's kind of the same as it was last year, which is disappointing. And, well, so far, it's still early, but so far it's a little disappointing. And They were eighth and third. Their eighth and third down percentage defensively at 30%, and seventh in points per game allowed at 16.5. Now Minnesota's injury report is much smaller because Mackenzie Alexander still out with a dislocated elbow. Ben Gideon still questionable with a groin. Elfline, he is questionable with his knee. Hughes is questionable with his knee coming back from his multi-ligament knee surgery from last season. And Anthony Barr is probably the biggest name on this list. He's questionable with a groin as well. But I would think Hughes, Barr, and Elfline are probably all going to play just because Elfline had a full practice. They're calling Hughes questionable, but he fully practiced throughout the whole week. And even though Barr had 2 limited practices and 1 where he didn't practice at all, both him and Zimmer were kind of saying the same thing where they kind of feel like he's going to play. So I imagine that probably bodes well for his availability for this game against the Oakland Raiders. So now, kind of go into more specifics. So, offensively, I think Kirk may have to fix what he has done last week, or at least more, because he is facing the 32nd ranked pass defense and it's at home, and this defense has proven to do pretty well against the run so far this year. So whatever problems he has, they need to get fixed and fast. So that being said, even if the run isn't working as well as it has the last 2 weeks or not at all, whatever it may be, you still need to not abandon it because we need the balance. I think we have at least proven that with as long as we have Kirk Cousins. If he's throwing it 40, 50 times a game and we're only running sub 20 carries, not going to work. That's not how this offense is going to work. You're probably going to lose 9 out of 10 times that happens. So even if it's not working as well and you are only getting around 3 yards a carry this game, keep it. Keep it. Don't truly abandon it entirely. Because if you take away Cousins' play action, he becomes pretty useless. And I would say, just for the most part, you got to exploit that bad third down defense. As they're allowing 52% of the time they get on third down, they're allowing a first down. So just try to stay ahead of the chains. Don't make any stupid mistakes, kind of thing. No holdings, no backwards runs, really. Like if you throw an incomplete pass on first down, do a high percentage thing on second down so you at least get third and manageable. Because I think if you can get this down to 3rd and 5 and less for most of the game, you will probably see a Minnesota offense that can kind of keep our defense off the field and resting. Now, Benson Mayowa, he's a defensive end for the Raiders. He already has 3.5 sacks through 2 weeks. So, that being said, you might have to chip or slide his way to keep him at bay. Because Bay Area. No? Okay, I'll stop. But I would think you probably need to more rely on putting things that way to help him out, whichever side he's lining up on. And refs are calling holdings a lot this year. So I think that's another one where we kind of need to try to limit that penalty in specific, because this is an offense that can't really recover from 1st or 2nd and 20. It's not an offense that can do that really that consistently. I think we can say the offensive line is a big, bugaboo, so to speak, of this team. And I don't think they can protect Cousins long enough to do that. And that's when you really start to rely on the run game. But once again, in this game, might not have the run game as much as we have had it the past 2 weeks, just because that's really the one area where the Raiders have had a lot of success. Now, defensively, I think they'll want to run the ball. That's kind of how this team is. We have 2 teams here that would like to run the ball. And so I think you kind of sell out almost to stop this running attack, especially without Josh Jacobs, if they're still focusing on that, and you force a relatively weak wide receiving core to beat you at home against a pretty solid defense, I would say. And the one guy I would really say is a threat would be Darren Waller. He is a 6'6" tight end who ran a 4.46 at the combine. So yeah, he can run past most linebackers and safeties, I would say. So I don't think that is our main target to contain, as it's him and Tyrell Williams over there soaking up a lot of Derek Carr's targets when they do throw the ball. So if you can kind of get them in those, I think it's almost the exact opposite of what we want to be in, obviously, which is put them in 3rd and 5 to 3rd and longer, pretty much. Where I think that one probably goes without saying. But they do get Incognito back this week, even if they don't get Trent Brown back in the lineup this week, as they have had in the past 2 weeks. They haven't been working long together, even if Trent Brown is there, because obviously Gabe Jackson has been out, and then now you have a new left guard there, and if you also have a new right tackle, none of these guys have played together too long because he's been on suspension. It wasn't like he was hurt. So I think you might be able to do some creative looks and maybe cause some confusion up front. I think that might be more of your 3rd down kind of thing, as Zimmer likes to do that, mainly on 3rd down. But I would think you probably have some more creative looking defensive fronts for them to deal with for a line that hasn't been together too long yet. And this is another one where I feel like you just need to start faster than you did last week. Going into a 21-0 hole real early ended up kind of killing them, along with the play of a certain quarterback. But yeah, don't do that. Start a little faster. I don't think that's too much to ask there. And obviously prevent the dumb penalties. Now, I am taking Minnesota to win this game 24-10, but I'm also kind of being cautious about it just because we have a very similar situation to last year when it was week 3, Buffalo. You kind of had this odd-ish type of game at Lambeau, and now you kind of got the same thing where you got this weird game at Lambeau where it's like we kind of outplayed them for 3 quarters, but Kirk Cousins wasn't good, and so we lost. But now it's, we come home heavy favorites. And just instead of Buffalo, it's the Oakland Raiders. So try to prevent the Buffalo disaster and just do what you're supposed to do. That's all that has to be done. And the other thing I want to touch on here, I think we have over the next 4 games, including tomorrow with Oakland, you kind of have something that would be telling, because you have 2 games in here where you're kind of saying you should probably be able to win those, with the Giants and Oakland, and then you got Chicago and Philadelphia as the other games, with Chicago and the Giants being on the road, Oakland and the Eagles being at home, where Chicago and Philly are kind of those games where we look at Kirk Cousins and be like, you going to do it this time, or are we going to be repeating this whole thing that Kirk Cousins can't win? So it should be interesting, because even last year, some of those games that they were supposed to win, they did not win. And now we have 2 games and 2 other games where they're kind of both like that. So I think it should be interesting. I would like to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Until next time, I bid y'all adieu.